Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So today our group will present about Southeast Asia country, which is Brunei, Philippines and Indonesia.
Factors influence economy. First, Brunei. Brunei is well known for its heavily dependent on oil and natural gas. Stated that the gross domestic product (GDP) for Brunei, which is over 50%, is from oil and natural gas. Also, 90% of exports and 80% of government tax revenue are from oil and natural gas. The significant fiscal revenues from oil and natural gas help the growth of a large public sector, which provides various facilities and benefits. For example, high levels of investment in infrastructure and employment for a rapidly growing labor force. The next factor is industry. The construction industry was badly affected by the Asian financial crisis in 1997 and 1998, but the industrial sector as a whole was expected to rise rocket with rising world oil price in 2000. Lastly, services, including finance, accounted for 49% of GDP in 1996. Community, social, and personal services contributed a large amount in GDP. The government continuously made significant efforts to diversify its economy to boost non-oil sectors.
Moving on to the second country, which is Philippines. There are three main factors contribute to the GDP, which is number one is service sector. Service sector has been a major contributor to the GDP because in 2019 it contributed almost 60%. And it has been a major contributor to the economic growth since 1990. The example of the service sector include trade and private sector, gas, electricity and water, construction, and so forth. The second factor is industrial sector, which is contribute almost 30% of the GDP in 2019. The major industrial sector in the country include mining and mineral processing, pharmaceutical, and so forth. It is because Philippines is a country rich in both natural resources and human resources. The example of natural resources include nickel, copper, gold, silver, and salt. The last but not least is agriculture sector, which is contribute 10% of the GDP. It consists of forestry, crop production, aquaculture cultivation, and so forth. Agriculture sector support its local demand and has been an essential commodity to the Philippines.
Next, third country is Indonesia. So from the graph, we can see that among agriculture, industry and services, services has the highest contribution to GDP with 44.23% in 2019, and the second highest was industry with 38.95%, and the third highest that contribute to GDP is agriculture with 12.72%.
For gross domestic product or GDP for Brunei, we collect data from 2009 until 2019. So the data show that the highest GDP growth for period 2009 till 2019 is 19.048 billion US dollar in 2019. However, the lowest rate recorded at 2009, which is 10.732 billion US dollar. For Philippines, the data show that the lowest GDP was at 2009, which is amounted approximately 176.132 billion US dollar, and the highest GDP value was at 2019, with amount 376.796 billion US dollar. As you can see, it has been a constantly increasing pattern. Moving on to the Indonesia, the graph above show that the lowest GDP at year 2009, which is 539.58 billion US dollar. Then it continuously increased till it dropped at year 2015, which is 860.854 billion US dollar. However, it continued to rise until the highest at 2019, which is 1.119 trillion US dollar.
Unemployment rate. The highest unemployment rate in Brunei was during 2017, which was 9.316. As we can see, there is no fixed pattern for the unemployment graph. It declined in 2018 but increased in 2019. There was a slight deflation during 2020 and it was 9.044. It was better than the unemployment rate during 2017. Next, based on Philippines unemployment rate, the highest is during 2014, which was 3.60%, and from 2015 until 2019, it can be seen that the rate has constantly declined, which is good for the country as they are able to control the unemployment rate year by year. And the latest is 2019, which was 2.15%. Unemployment rate in Indonesia increased to 7.07% in August 2020. From the previous year, the unemployment rate was reported at 5.28% in August 2019. To conclude, it seems like Brunei got the highest percentage of unemployment, which 9.136%, meanwhile Philippines 2.15% and Indonesia 7.07%. But in reality, the population of Brunei is the lowest compared to the other two countries. In 2019, Brunei's population was 433,285, meanwhile Philippines 108.1 million and Indonesia 270.6 million. It cannot be measured which country is the highest in unemployment because there must be other factors to be considered. According to economists at BLS, they had decided to develop a set of alternative measures of labor underutilization. The measure covers a really limited range that includes only those who have been unemployed for 15 weeks or more to a very broad one that includes total unemployed or people marginally attached to the labor force and all individuals employed part-time for economic reasons.
Next, I will explain about inflation rate. So, inflation rate of Brunei from 2009 until 2019. From the graph, we can see that the lowest inflation rate is in 2017 with negative 1.28%, an increase in 2018 with 1.025%, but in 2019, the inflation rate was decreased, amounted with negative 0.391. Next, for Philippines, the lowest inflation rate was in 2015 with 0.67%, and the highest was in 2018 with 5.21%, and in 2019 the inflation rate was decreased to 2.48%. Lastly, inflation rate for Indonesia. So from 2009 until 2019, the highest inflation rate was in 2013 with 6.41%, and the lowest was in 2016 with 3.53%. and in 2019 it decreased to 2.82%. So by way of conclusion, the ideal inflation rate for each country is around 2%. This is because if the inflation rate is too high, it is not good for the country, as high inflation rate can create uncertainty. So here, among the three countries, as in 2019, the most ideal inflation rate is Philippines with 2.48%, following with Indonesia 2.82%, and lastly Brunei with negative 0.391%. Hence, it is advisable for these three countries to make sure their country has an ideal inflation rate that can suit with their current condition, and they can take care of their citizen welfare. So that's all from us. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.